Hi everyone, my name is Terri and welcome to my channel, The Pink Dumbbell Problem, and a Friday Fact Day episode, which is just my little corner of the internet where I get to talk about my work in fitness, feminism, and philosophy. And today's fact is the Matilda Effect and the Semmelweis Effect. I'm going to talk about both of these today. They're kind of a little bit related, and they're both things you've probably heard examples of but didn't know there was a name for this thing. So let me unpack all of that right now. Matilda Effect is a phenomenon in which women do a lot of work in a scientific field, making a discovery, an invention, what have you, but the men that they work with get the credit for it. Now, this is a title that was applied to this phenomenon in the early 90s, and it came from, like many things do on my channel, the work of science historians, in this case, Margaret Rossiter. Rossiter noticed this phenomenon was talked about before and particularly went back to the work of Matilda Jocelyn Gage. Gage was an early suffragist and abolitionist. She was basically what we would today call a social justice activist. And that's not a new concept. It's been around a long time. In 1870, Gage published a paper called Women as Inventors. And it established the idea that, yes, women are doing this work. They're just not being credited for it. Lots of examples of this throughout history, but probably the most famous one, the one you're most likely to have heard of, is Rosalind Franklin. She's probably the most famous person who ever didn't win a Nobel Prize. Franklin, for those not familiar, she is one of the team of scientists who discovered the double helix structure of DNA. So anytime you see that little double swirly helix diagram, she's one of the people who discovered that that was the shape of DNA. And true to form and true to the phenomenon, in 1962, the men she worked with got the Nobel Prize for this discovery. She didn't. But she's just one of many, 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 many examples. You can Google that. You'll see tons listed. It's easy to find examples where women were left on the back burner and the men that they worked with got all the credit or the prize money. Let's not kid ourselves. There's prize money in a lot of these things. So who's benefiting economically? Around the same time as Matilda Gage in the States doing her abolitionist and suffragist work, there was a medical doctor, Ignaz Semmelweis, who was working in Hungary. This is before we knew what germs were, okay? This is revolutionary. So he came up with this absolutely wacky idea that doctors should wash their hands between patients. Obvious, so sensible to us today. And here in 2021, in almost the 2-year mark of COVID-19 still going around on this planet, if I have to explain to you why hand washing is important, you've got bigger problems than watching my videos. Go take care of that. What I'm saying is, go wash your hands, you dirty little plague vector. You know, one of the things a friend of mine who works in retail told me was that soap sales went through the roof. Like, were you not all washing your hands before COVID-19? Like, what were you doing? It sounds absolutely bizarre today that wasn't already a thing, but he did an experiment with it. It worked. And you would think people would be excited about this, that doctors would go, oh, absolutely, we're adopting this as a policy right now. We're all getting in on this. We're all going to do it. That would have been sensible. That is not what happened. The Semmelweis effect is not necessarily always in a scientific context, although quite often it is. But it is basically this phenomenon where people have a knee-jerk reaction to say, no, we're not doing that. It's that whole thing where people go, well, we're doing it this way because we've always done it this way, and this is the way it's done. That's the Semmelweis effect, or Semmelweis reflex, as it's often called, because it is kind of a knee-jerk reaction like a body reflex. Nowadays, Semmelweis is a hero, but in his own time, absolutely not. And part of the reason he wasn't a hero in his own time, part of the reason his own colleagues thought he was absolutely crazy and completely ridiculous for suggesting that doctors were carrying disease from patient to patient because they didn't wash their hands. We've even heard of that before. Part of the reason that he wasn't taken seriously is because he was paying attention to what the midwives were doing. He was looking at it going, look, we've got a 16% death rate of women coming in to have a child. They've got a 2% rate. Like, maybe we should look at what they're doing. This was a time, of course, when women weren't allowed in most medical schools. These doctors couldn't for the life of them understand why he thought anything women were doing could be smarter than anything men were doing. Bizarre. Turns out he was right. Turns out a few years later, we discovered germs and bacteria and viruses and all the things that, well, they kind of rule our lives right now. So that, like I said, these two phenomena have a little bit of a connection. both rooted in sexism or in misogyny. The Matilda Effect, rooted in misogyny because people just didn't believe that women could be good scientists and therefore didn't see the value of crediting women for the scientific work they did. And the Semmelweis Effect or the Semmelweis Reflex, because in his own time, the idea that women were going to be smarter than men, especially when it came to something medical, was just utterly unthinkable. Women can't science good. Even in the naming, there is a little bit of a gender or sex difference, right? We name the Matilda Effect after Matilda Gage's first name. It's not called the Gage Effect, but Semmelweis is the Semmelweis Effect, not the Ignatz Effect or reflex. So again, even just a little bit of respectability of who's who in the sciences there in the naming convention. So there you go, folks. 2 new effects named after people. And these ones, you might not always see the names of them, but you're going to see them. You're going to recognize them now that I've told you what they're all about, especially if you're reading history documents or watching documentaries about history. You're going to see these things pop up, even if not by name. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching once again. I'll put a link down below for my other video on the other types of effects that I've already explained. And of course, I'd love for you to please share and subscribe and like and do all the clicky things in the boxes and links down below, all the YouTube stuff. And of course, as I always say, lift heavy, fight the patriarchy, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye.